June 15, 1941. Tokyo. A telegram leaves the Soviet embassy. Coded, urgent. It carries 16 words that could save millions. The sender, Richard Sorge, Stalin's best spy in the East. The message, Germany will invade on June 22nd. In Moscow, the telegram arrives on Stalin's desk. He reads it, then dismisses it as provocative information. 7 days later, 3.8 million German troops cross the Soviet border. They thought their intelligence network was unbreakable. But the man who trusted no one trusted the wrong silence. The Kremlin, summer 1941. Heavy curtains, dim light through tall windows, the smell of tobacco and old paper. Stalin sits alone at his desk. Before him, stacks of intelligence reports, some from London, some from Berlin, some from his own agents embedded deep inside the Wehrmacht. All say the same thing. Germany is coming. But Stalin does not believe them. He believes in the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. He believes in time. He believes the Germans are too rational to fight a two-front war while Britain still stands. Around him, his generals wait. They say nothing. In Stalin's office, silence is survival. One wrong word can mean exile, or worse. Outside, across the vast Soviet Union, the Red Army stands at partial readiness, not mobilized, not fortified, just waiting. And in Tokyo, 5,000 miles away, Richard Sorge watches the calendar. He has done his job. Now it is out of his hands. Richard Sorge was not just any spy. German-born, fluent in 5 languages, a journalist by cover, a communist by conviction. He had infiltrated the German embassy in Tokyo so deeply that Nazi diplomats trusted him with their secrets. And in the spring of 1941, those secrets became impossible to ignore. Sorge's network, agents inside the German military, the Japanese government, even the foreign ministry, fed him reports. Troop movements, logistics, fuel shipments, rail schedules. By May, the picture was complete. Operation Barbarossa was real. Sorge sent his first warning in early May. War inevitable. Stalin's response, silence. He sent another on May 19th. Attack expected late June. Stalin's response, a rebuke to Soviet intelligence for spreading panic. Then came June 15th. Sorge's final telegram, precise, unambiguous. Germany will attack USSR on June 22nd, 1941. In Moscow, the message was filed. Stalin wrote in the margin, "This is disinformation from an English agent." He believed it was a British plot, a trap to provoke a Soviet first strike, to drag the USSR into war prematurely. So he ignored it. And on June 22nd, 1941, at 3:15 a.m., German artillery opened fire along a 1,800-mile front. The numbers told the story Stalin refused to read. Operation Barbarossa, opening strength, 3.8 million German troops. That's more than the entire population of Norway, thrown at one border. 3,600 tanks, enough to form a steel column stretching from Berlin to Paris. 2,700 aircraft. They could darken the sky over an entire front. 600,000 motorized vehicles. 7,000 artillery pieces, the largest invasion force in human history. Against them, Soviet forces in the border districts, 2.9 million men. But not mobilized, not dug in, not expecting war. The Red Army had more tanks than Germany, more aircraft, more men. But they were scattered, unprepared, leaderless. The first 48 hours, 1,200 Soviet aircraft destroyed, most on the ground, lined up in neat rows on forward airfields. Easy targets. Entire divisions encircled before they could even organize a retreat. Communication networks collapsed within hours. Radio silence. Command paralysis. In Brest Fortress, Soviet soldiers woke to shellfire at dawn. They fought without orders, without reinforcements, without hope. They held for a week, then fell. In Minsk, Soviet Western Front Command lost contact with entire armies. Not battalions, not divisions, armies. Hundreds of thousands of men gone from the map. By June 28th, 6 days into the invasion, the Germans had advanced 280 miles. That's the distance from New York to Washington. In less than a week, they captured 150,000 prisoners. They destroyed 2,500 tanks. They shattered 3 Soviet armies. The Soviet Western Front, gone. Intelligence warnings Stalin ignored. Not just Sorge. April 1941. Soviet military intelligence, the GRU, reported 120 German divisions massing near the border. Tank concentrations, supply buildups, field hospitals being established. May 1941. A German deserter crossed the lines near the Bug River. He told Soviet commanders the exact attack date. June 22nd, June 21st, 1941. The night before the invasion. Another deserter. Same message, same date. Stalin ordered him shot as a provocateur. Even Winston Churchill sent a warning through British intelligence channels. Stalin dismissed it as capitalist manipulation, an attempt to draw the USSR into war. Why did Stalin not believe? Because he thought he had more time. Because he trusted the logic of the pact. Because he believed Hitler would finish Britain first. And because, in his mind, intelligence could be manufactured. Spies could be turned. Warnings could be traps. Every report looked like disinformation. Every agent looked like a potential double. So when the most accurate intelligence network in the world told him the truth, he chose not to listen. On June 22nd, at dawn, the Soviet ambassador in Berlin received a declaration of war. He tried to call Moscow. The line was dead. German bombers had already cut the communication cables. The war had begun, and the Red Army was still asleep. Stalin did not appear in public for 11 days. On June 22nd, as reports flooded in, armies shattered, cities bombed, front lines collapsing, he retreated to his dacha outside Moscow. He said nothing. He gave no orders. His commanders waited for direction. None came. The man who controlled every detail of Soviet life, from factory quotas to literature, could not process what had happened. Not might happen, had happened. The human cost, summer 1941. By July 1st, 750,000 Soviet soldiers captured or killed. That's the equivalent of the entire U.S. Army in 1940. In 1 month. By September 1st, 2.5 million casualties. By December 1st, 4.5 million. Entire armies ceased to exist. The 10th Army, encircled near Minsk, destroyed. The 3rd and 4th Armies, trapped in the Bialystok pocket, annihilated. The Soviet Air Force reduced to scattered remnants hiding in forests. In the Kremlin, when Stalin finally returned on July 3rd, his first words to his commanders were not orders. They were an admission. Lenin left us a great inheritance, and we've fucked it all up. General Georgy Zhukov, the man who would later save Moscow and capture Berlin, wrote in his memoirs, "The war began in the worst possible way. We were not ready. We did not believe it would come." Sorge's warnings could have changed that, not prevented the war, but prepared for it. Forward positions could have been fortified with concrete and steel. Aircraft dispersed across dozens of hidden airfields. Armies mobilized and positioned in defensive depth. Supply depots moved eastward, out of reach. Instead, the Red Army was caught sleeping, and the cost was written in blood across a 1,000-mile front. In Tokyo, Richard Sorge knew. He read the reports in the Japanese newspapers. German advances, Soviet retreats, cities falling. Everything he had sent, ignored. Everything he had risked, wasted. But Sorge did not stop working. By September 1941, he uncovered another secret. Japan's strategic decision for 1941. He sent a new message to Moscow. Japan will not attack the Soviet Union. Japan will move south against British and American positions in the Pacific. This time, Stalin listened. That intelligence allowed him to move 18 divisions from Siberia to the Moscow front. Fresh troops, winter-trained, unbloodied. Those divisions arrived in December 1941. They stopped the Germans at the gates of Moscow. They launched the first major Soviet counteroffensive of the war. Richard Sorge had saved the Soviet capital. But by then, the cost of ignoring him in June was already carved into history. Millions dead, entire regions occupied, a war that could have been prepared for, but wasn't. And the man who saw it coming, from 5,000 miles away, could only watch. He had sent the truth across half the world. It reached Stalin's desk, but it never reached his mind. Not might be lost, was lost. Why did it collapse so fast? Not just because Stalin didn't listen, but because the entire Soviet system was built on a foundation that cracked under the first real blow. Mechanism 1. The Great Purge. Between 1937 and 1939, Stalin purged the Red Army. 35,000 officers arrested or executed. 3 of 5 marshals shot. 13 of 15 army commanders shot. 110 of 195 division commanders shot. Imagine the U.S. military losing every general above 2 stars overnight for political reasons. The best military minds of the Soviet Union gone. Replaced by loyalists, men who feared Stalin more than they feared the enemy. What remained in 1941 was a command structure terrified to act without orders. When the invasion began, junior officers waited for permission to return fire. Permission that never came, because their superiors were waiting for orders from Moscow. And Moscow was silent. The Red Army in 1941 was not the Red Army of 1945. It was a force rebuilding from terror. Mechanism 2. The new border. In 1939, the USSR moved its western border 200 miles west, into Poland, into the Baltic states. A strategic buffer, Stalin thought, but also a logistical disaster. The old fortifications, the Stalin line, were abandoned, stripped of guns, left to decay. The new fortifications along the 1939 border, unfinished, incomplete, undermanned. Supply depots, airfields, command posts, all moved forward into the newly occupied territories. Close to the border, exposed. When the Germans attacked, they overran Soviet forward positions in hours. Fuel depots captured. Ammunition dumps destroyed. Communication centers obliterated. The Red Army's logistical backbone severed in the first day. Mechanism 3. Offensive doctrine. Soviet military doctrine in 1941 was built on one idea: attack. The Red Army trained to invade, not defend. Deep battle doctrine, mechanized thrusts, offensive operations into enemy territory. There were no defensive plans for the western border, no fallback positions prepared, no contingency orders for retreat. When the invasion came, Soviet units had no instructions for what to do. They were supposed to attack, but the enemy was already behind them. So they stood and fought where they were, and died where they stood. Mechanism 4. Intelligence paralysis. Stalin didn't just ignore Sorge. He ignored everyone. Soviet intelligence in 1941 was one of the best in the world. Agents in Berlin, London, Tokyo, Washington. But it was poisoned by paranoia. Every warning looked like a provocation. Every agent looked like a potential double. Every report looked like enemy disinformation designed to trick the USSR into striking first. Stalin had created a system where truth was indistinguishable from lies, because he trusted no one. So when the truth came, precise, urgent, undeniable, he had no way to recognize it. Mechanism 5. The logic of belief. Stalin believed in his own logic. He believed Hitler was rational. He believed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact would hold, at least until 1942. He believed Germany wouldn't dare fight a two-front war. And when reality contradicted that belief, he rejected reality, not out of stupidity, out of conviction, the same conviction that let him industrialize the Soviet Union in a decade, the same conviction that let him crush all opposition. That conviction in 1941 blinded him to the truth. In war, confidence is a weapon, but absolute confidence is a death sentence. Richard Sorge continued his work in Tokyo until October 1941. Then the Japanese secret police arrested him. They had been watching for months. They knew he was a spy. They just didn't know how important. In 1944, after 3 years in prison, Sorge was executed by hanging. He was 49 years old. Stalin never acknowledged him. Even after the war, even after victory, the Soviet government denied Sorge had ever worked for them. It wasn't until 1964, 11 years after Stalin's death, that Richard Sorge was officially named a hero of the Soviet Union. By then, his warnings had become legend. The man who told Stalin the truth and was ignored. Operation Barbarossa did not succeed. The Germans reached the gates of Moscow. They reached the outskirts of Leningrad. They drove deep into Ukraine. But they did not win. The Red Army, battered, broken, bleeding, held. Not because of preparation, but because of numbers, geography, winter, and the will to survive. By 1945, Soviet forces stood in Berlin. The swastika came down from the Reichstag. The war was over, but the cost was staggering. Soviet casualties, 1941 to 1945. 27 million dead. That's the entire population of Texas. Gone. 8.7 million soldiers killed in combat. 18 million civilians murdered, starved, or killed in the crossfire. The war that began with ignored warnings ended with a victory built on unimaginable sacrifice. The lesson is not that Stalin was foolish. He was not. The lesson is that even the most powerful systems can be paralyzed by their own logic. Stalin built a state where loyalty mattered more than truth, where belief mattered more than evidence. And when the evidence arrived, precise, urgent, undeniable, it had nowhere to land. Richard Sorge sent the truth across half the world. It reached Stalin's desk, but it never reached his mind. In war, the most dangerous enemy is not the one you cannot see. It is the one you refuse to believe in, until it is too late. December 8, 1941. Tokyo. Foreign Ministry basement. Intelligence officers bent over dispatches from Hawaii. Smoke curled from ashtrays. Maps of the Pacific spread across oak tables. They had studied the Americans for years. The Yamato Report, industrial data, public opinion polls. Every calculation pointed to one conclusion. Washington would negotiate. The Americans feared casualties. They were soft, unmotivated, divided. Pearl Harbor had succeeded beyond expectations. 8 battleships destroyed. The Pacific Fleet crippled. Now they waited. For the telephone. For the compromise. For the inevitable negotiation. They thought they had won. But within 72 hours, the first reports from mainland America arrived. And what they read changed everything. The room smelled of ink and tobacco. A single lamp cast shadows across the walls. Outside, Tokyo slept. The empire had crossed a threshold it could never uncross. Inside, men moved quietly. One adjusted his spectacles. Another traced fingers along the Hawaiian Islands. The silence was not tense. It was confident, relieved. Admiral Yamamoto's carrier strike had exceeded all expectations. Hundreds of aircraft obliterated, fuel depots burning, dry docks destroyed. The plan had worked perfectly. Now came the part they had prepared for. Negotiation. America would calculate the cost of war and choose compromise. Territorial concessions, recognition of Japan's sphere. It was rational. It was inevitable. The Americans were businessmen, not warriors. The analysts reviewed their data one more time. Public opinion polls. newspaper editorials, congressional debates. Everything confirmed it. America would negotiate. They waited for confirmation. The confirmation never came. For 18 months, Japanese intelligence had built a detailed portrait of the enemy. The Yamato report, 400 pages, had been clear. The United States was a nation of shopkeepers and isolationists. They had no stomach for prolonged war. Their society was fractured. Labor strikes, racial tension, political division. Their military was untested, unprepared for modern combat. The report quoted American newspapers extensively, editorials demanding neutrality, letters to Congress opposing intervention. Public opinion polls showed 70% opposition to war. The America First Committee had 800,000 members. Charles Lindbergh spoke to packed stadiums about staying out. The logic seemed airtight. Strike hard, destroy their fleet, demonstrate the price of resistance. Wait for Roosevelt to call. Japan's early conquests reinforced every assumption. Within 3 weeks, Guam fallen, Wake Island captured, Hong Kong surrendered, Manila occupied, British Malaya collapsing, Singapore under siege, the Dutch East Indies next. The advance seemed unstoppable, inevitable. Every victory confirmed the Yamato thesis. But in Washington, something else was happening. Something no analyst had predicted. Something the intelligence reports had completely missed. The Americans were not negotiating. They were not calculating costs. They were not debating options. They were mobilizing. For 18 months, Japanese intelligence had built a detailed portrait of the enemy. The Yamato report, 400 pages, had been clear. The United States was a nation of shopkeepers and isolationists. They had no stomach for prolonged war. Their society was fractured. Labor strikes, racial tension, political division. Their military was untested, unprepared for modern combat. The report quoted American newspapers extensively, editorials demanding neutrality, letters to Congress opposing intervention. Public opinion polls showed 70% opposition to war. The America First Committee had 800,000 members. Charles Lindbergh spoke to packed stadiums about staying out. The logic seemed airtight. Strike hard, destroy their fleet, demonstrate the price of resistance, wait for Roosevelt to call. Japan's early conquests reinforced every assumption. Within 3 weeks, Guam fallen, Wake Island captured, Hong Kong surrendered, Manila occupied, British Malaya was collapsing, Singapore under siege, the Dutch East Indies next. The advance seemed unstoppable, inevitable. Every victory confirmed the Yamato thesis. The Allies were retreating everywhere. The British withdrew from Burma. The Dutch collapsed in Java. MacArthur evacuated from the Philippines. Everything was going according to plan. But in Washington, something else was happening. Something no analyst had predicted. Something the intelligence reports had completely missed. The Americans were not negotiating. They were not calculating costs. They were not debating options. They were mobilizing. By January 1942, the first detailed reports reached Tokyo. Not diplomatic cables, industrial assessments, shipyard production. December 1941, 29,000 tons. February 1942, 63,000 tons. The numbers climbed every week. Aircraft production 1941 total, 19,433 aircraft. Projected 1943, 85,898 aircraft. Imagine the sky over London during the Blitz. Now imagine that same sky filled with American bombers every month for 3 years. Military mobilization. December 1941, 1.8 million men. June 1942, 5.4 million men. An army the size of Los Angeles. Recruited in 6 months. Typewriters clattered in basement offices. Analysts cross-checked numbers, searching for errors. There were none. Raw material capacity. Steel, United States 75 million tons. Japan 6.8 million tons. Oil, United States 183 million barrels. Japan dependent on imports, now severed. Picture 10 factory smokestacks in Tokyo. Now picture 110 in Pittsburgh. That was the steel gap. In the corner of the intelligence office, one analyst stared at a photograph. Henry Kaiser's Richmond shipyard. 7 slipways, all occupied. Thousands of workers. 3 shifts, 24 hours. The photograph was dated February 1942. 10 weeks after Pearl Harbor. Liberty Ship Program, standard construction time. 42 days per vessel. Achieved by late 1942. 24 days. Record SS Robert E. Peary launched in 4 days. 4 days. A 10,000-ton cargo ship. Built faster than Japan could sink them. Another photograph arrived. Women in coveralls working assembly lines, welding aircraft fuselages, installing engines. The caption read, "Rosie the Riveter." America was mobilizing its entire population. Carrier construction, Essex-class carriers under construction. 11 ships. Each displacing 27,000 tons. Each carrying 90 aircraft. Japan's entire pre-war carrier fleet, 6 ships. America was building nearly 30 fleet carriers, plus dozens of escort carriers. Heavy bomber data B-17 production in 1941. 512 aircraft. B-17 projected for 1942. 4,000 aircraft. B-29 under development. Range 3,250 miles. Tokyo was 1,500 miles from the nearest American base. For now. A final photograph lay on the table. Ford's Willow Run plant under construction. 1 mile long, half a mile wide. A single building designed to produce 1 B-24 Liberator bomber every 63 minutes. The analysts laid the reports side by side. Steel, oil, aircraft, ships, manpower. Every category told the same story. The Americans were not retreating. They were not negotiating. They were converting their entire civilization into a war machine. And they were accelerating. Lieutenant Commander Ishikawa sat alone. 3rd floor office. Imperial Palace grounds, visible through the window. March 1942. He had been assigned an impossible task. Reconcile the Yamato predictions with actual American response. The reconciliation could not be done. Before him lay 3 months of intelligence. Enlistment figures, factory conversion reports, congressional transcripts, intercepted correspondence from Boeing, Ford, Chrysler, General Motors. President Roosevelt's December 8th address had been broadcast worldwide. Translated within hours. The vote in Congress, Senate 82-0, House 388-1, One dissenting vote, Representative Jeanette Rankin of Montana, a pacifist who had also opposed World War I. One vote, in a nation of 132 million people. Ishikawa read intercepted factory memos. Boeing expanding Seattle from 4 lines to 18. Ford converting River Rouge to B-24 production. Chrysler retooling Detroit tank arsenal. General Motors converting Buick, Oldsmobile, Cadillac plants to aircraft engines. He found photographs from American magazines. Life, Look, Time. Women in factories wearing coveralls, riveting, welding, assembly line work. The captions called them Rosie the Riveter. Another poster showed a worker, sleeves rolled, jaw set. We can do it. The language in intercepted communications was not fearful. It was defiant, vengeful. Remember Pearl Harbor? The phrase appeared everywhere. Factory walls, recruitment posters, newspaper headlines. It was not a memorial. It was a battle cry. Ishikawa understood then what the Yamato report had fundamentally misunderstood. The attack had not broken American will. It had not created fear, not paralysis, not desire for negotiation. It had unified 132 million people into a single purpose: total victory. The isolationists vanished overnight. The America First Committee dissolved. Labor disputes paused. Political divisions evaporated. Pearl Harbor transformed a reluctant, divided nation into something Japan had never encountered: a fully mobilized industrial democracy, unlimited resources, no intention of stopping. Ishikawa drafted a 30-page memo. He submitted it through proper channels. It was filed, ignored. 3 months later, June 1942, Admiral Yamamoto received updated intelligence. Following Midway, 4 Japanese carriers destroyed: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu. Irreplaceable vessels, irreplaceable pilots. American losses: USS Yorktown. The report included projections on American carrier construction. The numbers were verified, cross-checked, confirmed. Yamamoto read the document twice. He said nothing to his staff. He folded the pages carefully, placed them in his desk drawer. He locked the drawer. Later that evening, he sat alone in his quarters. He did not write letters. He did not review charts. He simply sat. A photograph lay on his desk. His own carrier fleet before the war. 6 magnificent vessels. The pride of the Imperial Navy. He looked at the photograph for a long time. Then he turned it face down. He had known since December 7th. Not might be lost. Was lost. Why had the miscalculation been so catastrophically complete? The answer lay in 3 fundamental misunderstandings. First, industrial capacity versus industrial mobilization. Japanese analysts counted factories meticulously. They measured steel output, shipyard tonnage, refinery capacity. The data was correct. But they missed one critical concept: industrial elasticity. America possessed redundant peacetime capacity. Automobile plants became tank factories overnight. Civilian shipyards built destroyers. Refrigerator manufacturers produced machine guns. The infrastructure already existed. It required only redirection, not construction. Detroit produced 3.5 million automobiles in 1941. By 1943, Detroit produced 0 automobiles. Instead, 75,000 tanks, 27,000 aircraft, 2.6 million trucks. The conversion took 6 months. Imagine a city of factories. In peacetime, they make cars. In wartime, the same workers, the same assembly lines, the same buildings. But now they produce bombers. Japan had no equivalent. Its industries were already maximized for war. No reserve, no elasticity. no margin. Second, the psychology of surprise attack. The Yamato report assumed rational actors, cost-benefit analysis, negotiation, compromise. It did not account for rage. Pearl Harbor was not perceived as a military defeat. It was perceived as betrayal, an attack during peace negotiations. On a Sunday morning, without declaration of war, 2,403 Americans killed in 90 minutes. The emotional response was not fear. It was fury, personal fury, national fury, the kind that sustains 4 years of total war. A mother in Iowa read about Pearl Harbor. Her son was stationed there. She went to the factory the next day, started working double shifts building bombers. That story repeated millions of times. Japan wanted to shock America into negotiation. Instead, it gave America something it previously lacked: moral certainty. Third, strategic geography. Japan's empire was vast but fragile. Every conquest lengthened supply lines. Every occupied territory required garrison forces. The perimeter expanded faster than the ability to defend it. By mid-1942, supply lines stretched 4,000 miles. Fuel tankers ran gauntlets of American submarines. Imagine a supply convoy. 6 tankers leaving Borneo. 2 weeks to reach Tokyo. American submarines waiting. 1 tanker sunk, then another. By 1944, 4 out of 6 never arrived. America's geography was the opposite. 2 oceans provided natural defense. Industrial heartland, physically untouchable. Resources internal. Could build, train, deploy at leisure. Completely secure from counterattack. A factory worker in Detroit never heard gunfire, never saw an enemy plane, just built tanks every day for 4 years. Japan designed a strategy for a 6-month war. Quick strike, favorable negotiation, return to competition. America was not interested in that war. America was preparing for annihilation. The mechanisms were simple, the implications inescapable. By June 1942, 6 months after Pearl Harbor, the imbalance became reality. At Midway, 4 Japanese carriers destroyed in one afternoon. With them, 2 M48 aircraft, 3,057 men, irreplaceable pilots, irreplaceable vessels. American losses: USS Yorktown, 147 aircraft, 307 men. The ratio repeated across 3 years. Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Philippines, Iwo Jima, Okinawa. For every Japanese aircraft lost, replacement might take 3 months. For every American aircraft lost, 3 replacements were already in production. By 1944, American factories produced more aircraft in 1 month than Japan produced in an entire year. The men who bent over maps in December 1941 watched the empire contract, island by island, battle by battle. They had misread one variable, a single variable. But in war, one error compounds, metastasizes, becomes fatal. By March 1945, Tokyo itself burned. 300 B-29s dropped 1,665 tons of incendiaries. In 3 hours, 16 square miles destroyed, 100,000 dead, more casualties than Hiroshima. The empire that stretched from Manchuria to the Solomon Islands collapsed. 3 million Japanese soldiers and civilians dead, cities erased, 2 atomic bombs, unconditional surrender. It began with a miscalculation, the belief that surprise attack would break America's will. Instead, it forged that will into something unbreakable. Final reflection. In war, the greatest danger is not the enemy you see. It is the enemy you think you understand. Japan knew America's factories. It knew steel production, oil reserves, shipyards, aircraft plants. The intelligence was accurate, the data correct, but it did not know America's soul. It did not understand that some nations, when struck without warning, do not calculate costs. They do not negotiate settlements. They do not seek compromise. They seek victory, total victory, unconditional victory, and they will pay any price to achieve it. That was the variable Japan missed, and in the end, it was the only variable that mattered.